Welcome to our discussion on top voices. And that's a conversation that we do with global thought leaders. So I'm Paula McGrath, who's the CEO and owner of International Achievers Group. And then here beside me we have Bruno Herrmann, who's one of the best known and most respected professionals in the localization industry. And then today's guest is Giulia Tarditi, and Giulia is the head of language experience of Revolut. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you
Giulia.
for having me.
So I suppose the format of the discussion, it's going to be try and keep it as relaxed as possible. We'd like to, whatever you're happy to talk to us about, tell us a little about yourself, a little about the challenges within your work environment, and maybe ideas, plans for the future, anything that you're allowed to or willing to share.
Thank you.
So then Bruno and I are going to intersperse the questions. Bruno obviously is a technical expert. So I suppose, are you happy to start and tell us a little bit about yourself? What brought you to your current role and where you are?
It's been a journey. I didn't get to localization via the traditional route. Like, I've not studied translation or anything related. I've studied cross-cultural communications, and I was gifted in writing, and I could learn languages really fast. And I was interested in tech, and I thought, I'll probably carve out a role that has elements of it. So I started out as a copywriter, and then someone from a big agency pitched the idea of localization to the company I was at, and I wanted to own it. I thought, maybe this could be a good career path for me. And I really saw that there was a bit of a delta between what I thought localization was or could be and what other people around me were telling me that it was. And so I felt a lot of pressure to conform. Initially, as an outsider to the industry, I felt a bit like an amateur. But then in the end, you have to stay true to yourself and to your values. And I thought, I could bring something different to it. There was no way I could compete with the super technical people, like the uber technical project managers that had done 15 years in vendors and so on. But I could bring a different angle to it. And for me, the angle has always been how does translation and how does language affect the way we go about life, right? Our experiences, mostly our experiences, but the way we process the world. Incidentally, I ended up working in localization in roles that were always in tech and sort of focused primarily on product localization of UIs and UX elements. And so for me, this was big, right? As a thing itself, I really wanted to understand, okay, so, there's this whole experience of, there's this craft of product management. I could see that it was a thing, and it was recognized as a team that had a right to exist, right? And their own agenda and large resources and budgets. And then it was marketing, it was doing something similar. And then there was localization, and it was expected to be this afterthought, done really scrappily or just get it done and very reactive. And I thought it could be done different, right? And I was very interested in product management, although my passion was languages. Okay. And so I toyed with the idea of going into product management, but I thought, what if I can bring some of the elements of product management, some of its obsession with data to my discipline. There was a lot of talking about data in localization itself, but it was, when I say it was the wrong data, I don't mean it was wrong, but it felt wrong to me. It was not what I was passionate about, cost per word or the throughput or the. It was not what I thought could move the needle, or at least where I thought I could move the needle. And so I started borrowing bits and bobs, some KPIs, and I was never really good with math, so I was scared about having to dig into data myself.
Okay.
And then I got, brave enough to say, okay, let me slice through the data that these other teams have, like product marketing, etc., with a language lens, with a lens that was based on the geographies of the go-to-markets that we were targeting, and see if there's any insights that come to mind, right? Like, and I started seeing that there was a lot of juice in it. I could look at other people's data without a need to set up my own data programs, which sometimes is hard, right? You need resources, you need a data analyst, you need someone with like SQL skills or Python to set up a dashboard. But what if I could just get other people's data, look at it with like on a language by language basis, see where there's opportunities, you know, how they differ. Like, let's say there's maybe an onboarding flow for an account creation. Let's see if French has different numbers compared to Dutch and, you know, in the European market. And let's see if there's any insights I can get. And let's see. Then I started wondering, let's see if I can influence it. Because initially it was a bit passive. Like I was just trying to consume this data and being surprised at the patterns, right? But I thought, what if I can move this data with my craft?
Do you mean influence for internal stakeholders, external stakeholders? Influence for whom?
I think, you know, what if let's say there is... again, like a onboarding funnel, right? Like I need someone to create an account on a platform. Let's say it's a social media platform. Yeah. And out of 100 people that get started, about 60 complete the account creation on average. But I can see that, for example, if their browser language is French, those are not 60 out of 100, they're 52. And so I'm starting to think like, you know, what is different in this French funnel? And what if, you know, if I act on this, on the wording on this funnel, can I bring that number up, right? Or can I bring it down by doing some other actions? And ultimately, I saw that I could. At least at the time, I didn't have access to an A/B testing platform. And when I asked for one, I think at the time, the company I was at had toyed with the idea of getting a A/B testing platform called Optimizely. Anyways, it was quite big back then. But they were like, no, we don't have any money for localization. Sorry, we use it for product, but we're not going to set you up with it. And so I started to think like, okay, I can't have the A/B tests. That's a bit of a setback. But what can I do to sort of get to the same results, to similar results? And so there's things you can do, like alternate tests, right? Like every week you change the translations on the funnel. And then you alternate. 1 week is old translations, 1 week is a new one. And so it's a sort of A/B testing, but you know, you do it yourself. Or, again, like my baseline, before the changes, conversion was 60 out of 100. When I changed it was 62 out of 100. Like, what else can I change to drive it up, right? And that was just language, not even working with product to suggest maybe some other choices and so on. And I think for me, like, that was a turning point because there, I really stopped obsessing with, like, what do I still don't know about localization? And it gave me the freedom to think, okay, what can I bring to this discipline, right? Like, how do I carve out my own niche and my own personal branding, right? Like in the industry based on what I think I can, where I think I can add value. And I thought I had found a place where I can add value. And from there, it was more about trying to see, you know, for me, when I look at, like, what am I going to do in my next move, etc. I look at what else do I want to grow in? Like, do I want to upskill? Do I want to know more about the experience management as a science? Or do I want to learn more about data-driven companies? Or like, and this is how I choose, depending on the moment I find myself in and what I've learned up until that. You know, and like, you know, then there's turning points. You get hungry for another skill or a new, and this is what has driven the decisions to move from one thing to another at a certain point.
And then outside work, what keeps you sane?
Oh, my family. I'm the lucky mom of 8-year-old twin boys who are absolutely amazing. My husband.
8-year-old.
We have a lovely Lovely
trying to picture
family.
I'm trying to picture
We got our hands full.
just a bit.
And isn't it fascinating? Like, my kids were brought up bilingual because they were brought up in London, by Italian parents. And I think if I will ever leave the localization industry, it's going to be to change the way we educate people about language, like language education or second language education, because I think, one of the biggest lie of language learning education as we've had it was that when you learn a second language, you need to go about it differently than when you're learning your first language. It's absolutely not true, right? So starting with grammar, I don't know about you, but when I was taught languages at school, you started with grammar. Yep. And then maybe by the end of the fourth year, you could say a full sentence. But that didn't really matter because you knew all your phrasal verbs, right? And you could make a list of it. But the problem with that is that's an artifice. That's not how people learn language. If you see the kids, right? And for me, it was fantastic to learn even more about my field by watching them grow up. And that kept me sane through the troubles. Kids learn about single languages, right? First, they learn a few words, and then they manage to put these words together. And only when they are a fully proficient speaker of a language, they go to school. Yeah. And that's they start reading and being so if if ever I leave localization, it will be
you're ever in charge.
It will be to set this straight, I think. But I also love being outside in nature. I live in Italy right now, but I go back to London. We say with two hearts. It is my closest to the heart place, and I love traveling. Although I don't get to do it that often, and swimming keeps me sane. When I go swimming, there's that silence. There's just me and the water. They say swimming is so we get to the pool even though the water is really cold and it's not nice to wake up in the morning and go swimming because it reminds us of our mother's womb.
I never heard that.
That sort of safety feeling of being immersed in water and moving our bodies in it. I don't know if this is what it does to my head, but it does keep me sane.
No, I'm not a water baby, but I'm very much an outdoors hill walker. And the thing that matters to me is I do not want to see one car or one house. But the same probably happens when you're in a pool or you're swimming in the sea. And the other thing, actually, your comment there about when we learn languages, I actually think languages are most effectively learnt in the home. My father was an Irish speaker, so I grew up, until I went to school, funnily enough, but from a toddler, I was speaking Irish and English. And it was the best way to learn a language. You don't know you're learning. You're not learning, you're just living. Yeah. You're just getting up in the day and you're going to the fridge and you're going to the cooker and you're helping your mum and you're doing all that stuff. So, for me, learning language, it's not about learning, it's about living it. I'm not trying to be cliched, because I know it's too easy to be cliched about everything in life. But I think it's about living it, and it's how we engage in general, and it doesn't really matter what language you're doing it in. Obviously, the person opposite you, it's helpful if they understand what you're saying.
That's super true. It's like the learning is embedded in what you're doing, right?
Completely.
In the way you go
about
life, rather than being a thing in itself.
And then when I got into secondary school, then I did French and German. Now the French and German, although it doesn't take long for it to come back, but I don't have the vocabulary as an adult. I don't have adult vocabulary in those languages because I only learnt it in school and I haven't put the time in. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry, Bruno.
No, that's all right. I was thinking about what Giulia just said before, talking about language experience, and when you say living the language, it's really. That is all about language experience. It's not just to use the language, but to live it. And I think that that's why language experience is so important. And I know it's one of your passions, but it's really key, also in terms of business, that people, live their language or the language they can at least speak.
I know,
but actually, it's a very interesting, I would say, concept, because indeed, in many cases, language is more like something that you learn and something that you can use or not, but you are never requested to live it. And actually that's where, an experience can be really appealing and compelling when you start, not just understanding what is in front of you, but actually, you can live it because, of course, you understand it, but also you can project yourself in it.
It stirs so many strong feelings because it's part of our identity.
Exactly.
It's very like you can't process the word. Like even when you look at that and you're saying it's a door, you're giving language to it. Even our thought process is rooted in words. So the way we experience the world is absolutely, it cannot be done without words. And so I think it's such a massive opportunity for our industry, right? Like everyone now is in the business of experiences and, crafting this unforgettable experiences, whether it's product experiences, learning experiences, what it is. So our craft can absolutely be not at the service of this trend, but in the driving seat, by embracing some of the science behind it.
I think that I 100% agree with the principle of all that, but I actually think it can be quite difficult to remember that when we're all in business. So unfortunately, the byline or the side effect of it is that it ends up being commodified. So because that's how we make a living, that's the sad thing about it. So it's just how to get the time, and sometimes you just need to just step outside, which is what we're doing now, talking about stuff that we just don't normally speak about. But it's a little like, is that a door? Or, some people are actually brilliantly talented at being able to describe that as a portal. Or, some people are just brilliantly able to do that. Sorry, I'm just agreeing pretty much with what you just said there. But how do we set aside the time, and how do we get people to come along with us and realise that it is about living. It is about living our life and our language and the way we live and the way we communicate with each other and the way we deal with each other. So, but we don't always set aside the time to think like that. But anyhow, I'm just philosophising here about nothing. Sorry. So I suppose back now to Revolut, if you're happy to talk a little bit about something that you think is unique, because you've obviously worked in different organisations, although Bruno has told me that you seem to have a particular interest in certain types of organisations or certain stages that they're at in their own development and evolving. But what do you think is unique about where you are now?
I'm passionate about scale-ups.
Yes.
That's absolutely true. Because I think I'm fascinated with the moment when you have to go from being like super good with ideas and act on them quickly to having to scale them up to something that is
process.
A playbook that you can iterate on and then go with to scale in different markets and in a bigger organization, more structured. I love structure. It keeps me sane. And so probably moving to these roles when companies are at this time helps me dive into, channel my energy and my love for structure into a place where I can make a difference. What I think is unique about Revolut is their ability to execute at scale and at speed is at least unprecedented with what, if we think about my experience, my limited experience, I haven't seen this anywhere else.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's culture.
Within Revolut?
Yeah,
okay.
It must be culture, and it must be that they managed to keep this unique think about culture throughout the early years and to somehow hire for it, right? So it's there's a lot of talking about culture when you hire, like on your portal, on your careers portal, and these are the values, but once you're in, it's very easy to see that in a lot of places is a facade, right? I think at Revolut they managed to really embed that in the talent search, those values, that culture. And so they've always brought in talent that matched, what they expected from their force, from their staff, and based on the goals that the company has. the product is amazing. It just works, right? And it's very hard to find something that needs improving in the existing product. But it's the speed at which they can kick out stuff that is new and adds a lot of value on top of like what is an already like highly complex and structured product. Because I think at Revolut, there's an understanding of the user base that goes beyond what's expected, right? What's wrong. There is a curiosity for what does the user actually need right now, and how can I make this user feel that this is the only place in the world where they would get this done, whatever that is, opening an account, like doing wire transfer, etc. Because I'm going, I know the user so much that I'm going to anticipate their needs from a product evolution perspective. Right? I'm going to evolve my product based on this research and this understanding, and I'm going to iterate on the product based on the response of these users.
It's real-time feedback.
Elsewhere is just something we say, right? And there's a willingness, a genuine willingness to embrace change, but not change for the sake of it, right? Just change where it can add value and to deliver it across the organization, not just talking about in the end, like we change by changing, right? Not by talking about change. But I think a lot of companies just talk about change on the surface. But at Revolut, they just act on it.
If you were to talking about culture, if you were to just pick one word, what is the word for the culture? Do you think?
Never settle.
Never settle. Okay.
That's just the bar keeps going up.
Okay,
for
so
like holding ourselves accountable in terms of like making, putting the user center stage or delivering the results. And like, of course you get there, right? You achieve, and that's important. That gives you a sense of like satisfaction, and it's nurturing, right? It's soothing. Achievement is soothing. But then what's next? I think it's that hunger for what's next that drives unprecedented growth
I can
at
relate
Revolut.
to that because one of my previous managers told me, the one advice he gave me was never be satisfied. Even when you feel comfortable, don't feel comfortable. Go elsewhere. Take something else. And I can relate to what you just said because it's really about, going out of the comfort zone, which is comfortable for some people, but not comfortable for other people. So,
if you think about it, how hard is it to hire for never settle or never be satisfied truly? Because a lot of people are like comfort, right? The idea of it, right?
Exactly.
It's nurturing. Is a pajama set, right? But it's hiring so that you don't, like, out of 100 people, very few do not have that thing. It's super hard.
What I believe, I'm very blessed. We have a foster daughter. She's a grown woman now, 34 years old, and she's super smart. Oh my goodness, can that girl pass an exam to beat the band? But she spent a long time. She's a very nice job that suits her down to the ground now. But she knows she's a very capable woman. But the thing that took me a long time to get her to realise is that stop underestimating others. Just stop. And I think that if people have the ability to realise there are so many super smart people out there, I think so don't underestimate others. And I think those that have the ability to not underestimate others are those that keep shooting for the stars. And also, the trouble that I've had over the years, because I'm a restless spirit too. I'm somebody who's, I'm much older than you, so some of that has sort of, age has knocked out some of that out of me. But I'm still why can't we do it better, nicer, faster, better? But what I have realised over the years is that sometimes, I would like people like that to work with me. I'd love to. But I have to accept that they are the people that are going to take my job, which is, honestly, I have no problem with that. So the reality of it is they are there. And I don't always know that the interviewing process is actually set up effectively to attract those people. So those people realise that that's an employer of choice. And I don't think that a lot of employers are very good at putting together the pitch to become employer of choice. and identify, sort of categorize themselves for the type of person they want to attract, but also identify that person is probably going to be better than the person that's hiring them in maybe 24 months' time. But so what? Let them bring that energy and that contribution to the organisation. So I think that it can be done, but I do think that the employer, this is what I've experienced over the years, and I've been in recruitment. I had a different profession before that, but been in recruitment for an awful long time now, and trying to explain to organisations that if you want somebody who's going to shoot the stars out of the sky, do not put somebody in front of them at an interview that is watching their clock to go home, that's actually, has low energy levels. So be able to put your own pitch together to identify yourself as employer of choice for a particular category of individual.
It's hard, right? Like as an employer to ensure that your employer branding
That's key.
Speaks to these people,
Yeah.
right? And only brings in, because it's tough to say to people, here, you're expected to never settle. A lot of people will be like, whoa, that's not me. Like, I don't want to get there. Like, I want comfort. An awful lot of other people will crave that. But they're not necessarily, that's talent that's very hard to compete for.
Yeah.
So as an employer...
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's hard to compete for.
It's hard to compete for. And you said something that really triggered a lot of food for thought. You said, you want the people that understand there's a lot of, other folks are going to outsmart them, right?
Smart, yeah.
You also want people, I think, that combine that with an understanding that there will be smarter people where you go, smarter than you. But so what? You will learn from them.
I know.
It's just, I think this is what scares some people away. What am I going to do if people are smart? And I knew that by joining Revolut. I heard that the talent bar was so high. Initially, I was like, what am I going to do there, right? Like, because that is a little bit, it triggers fear. Because you're like, what if I don't live up to expectations? But I'm like, so what? I'm going to learn. I'm going to be a sponge, right? I'm going to drag and drop all of the features that I like from all of these super talented individuals and bring them into my own personal upskilling pod, right? And iterate and get to yet another version of myself as a professional. So I guess this is what made me want to move.
So when you were interviewing, this hadn't crossed my mind until right now. When you were interviewing, they must have said something that made, because I would always assume that you'd fit into that category of the super smart people. So I'd have thought it would be a good match for you. Now, I don't pretend to know you brilliantly well, but I have seen you speak and I know of you.
I think it's...
I'm guessing you'd have had options.
I knew it was very hard. Yes. Also because I think localization is such a niche industry, right? Like as a field of professionals. Yeah. Like I knew that for like a highly qualified localization job, like when they were looking for someone quite senior, like I could, I had what it took to apply. But I also knew that the talent bar was high at Revolut. And I knew that it was tough going through the interview stage. So actually, when a recruiter pinged me about the opportunity, I was like, hang on a minute. Do I want to go through like 8 stages of interview and then like maybe when I'm there, I'm going to find that things are really challenging and so on and so forth. So my own agenda... I teach my team about flipping meetings agenda. But like my own agenda for each of the interviews, like I was preparing for beforehand, right? I knew what I wanted to get out of it. I wanted a sense for the culture. And so for each of the interview stages, there was something I wanted to learn. And so I would try and flip the meeting to ensure that I would get my answers to know whether I really wanted to move on, because Qualtrics for me was like a fascinating role. I loved it. I learned a lot through it. I had gotten to a point where I was like feeling I had delivered on my roadmap a bit faster than I had expected. And by the end of my 3 years at Qualtrics, we were using language models to localize language models. We had language models operating in our product, and I'd pitched the idea of using machine translation and then Gen AI to localize these language models, because otherwise they costed a lot of money to make suitable for other languages. These language models, they would allow brands to analyze sentiment. And so they were rich in words, right? Because they had to analyze sentiment through words used in customer care conversations versus product reviews. And of course, all of these language models were monolingual. So I pitched the idea of using MT to localize the models, which initially was seen as something really far-fetched. But to me, it was really the next step of what I wanted to achieve at Qualtrics. And once that was done and was operational and so on, I knew I was ready to look around. But the Revolut opportunity, like B2C is my passion. Like even though Revolut has a business line, a B2B line, it's primarily it's very customer centric. And after 3 years in SaaS, I really craved that element of localization for the end user that I didn't necessarily have too much at Qualtrics. And so I relished the opportunity. And because of this, all that I heard about it, all that I found out during interviews, all of this user-centeredness, not just being a lie or something nice that people talk about, but really the way they operate. I was like, I'm just gonna jump ship and learn a lot from these guys and develop my craft into what I think it can be, right? Like to take it to yet another
Next
place.
level. Bruno,
well, this is fascinating, and just for the audience, we are now here just outside the hotel where Lock World is taking place. Lock World 51 already. Wow, throughout the day, I was talking to some people presenting, just like you today, and we were talking about presentations. And I attended a number of your presentations, and there are two words that come to my mind to sort of label your presentations. It is passion and innovation. But these two words, in my own experience, come with challenges. Challenges that can be more human-centric or that could be related to technology. So I'm just curious if you had to tell me or anybody, about your challenges, the challenges that you are facing today or the ones that you faced in the past. What would you highlight in terms of, again, it can be a combination of human and technology challenges, or if it's more technology related, it's good. It's good. Just for people to understand what can be really challenging when somebody like you who wants to go above and beyond, who doesn't, like to stay in a very comfortable zone. When you say, okay, I want to achieve this, yes, you have the passion, you have the innovation in your blood, but okay, you know that you are going to face challenges. Is it going to be the people, the technology, or everything?
I think as with a lot of things, I'm going to say mostly it's the people. In the sense that, when you're very passionate about something and you've got a conviction, you believe something really strongly. As I do. Also being on the neurodiversity spectrum, like I feel strongly. I'm a strong feeler. And sometimes you want other people to be as passionate as you from the get-go. Yep. And it's hard because you've already done that journey in your head.
Yeah, I know.
And you got to a destination. And what you got to do is go back to square one.
I know.
But you don't want to drag people there. You want to walk hand in hand with them. And so you need to go at their own pace. And they're going to have questions. And they're going to have doubts. And for some reason, for me, like my own personal challenges come to terms with the fact that people sometimes struggle with change. I love change, but I know a lot of people don't. And so and this is a challenge I'm facing right now as well. Like, how do I get out of my head a little bit and put like someone else's shoes on and try and see the idea I'm pitching with their own eyes and see where the what scares me.
Yeah.
And then I can prevent some of those questions and address them, or I can empathize more with how they place. I can see where people are coming from, and I can question my vision in a way that is enriching, right? Because if whatever someone fears about the vision and the passionate delivery of an idea that I'm trying to introduce makes me question it in a positive way, and I'm like, what else, right?
Yeah.
So someone fears X, maybe that makes me think of Y, right? Like, and I enrich and iterate on the idea of the basis of, and this is something I've only learned in the past couple of years. Like before, it would lead to enormous frustration on my end. And maybe also an attempt to drag the people from square one to 100.
I like that.
And then they're avoiding you then at lunchtime.
Like one of the super
Dragging people. That's really that's perfect. I mean,
But then they run away and leave you on your own at lunchtime.
You know when you got Snakes and Ladders, the table game, and there's that top ladder that takes you straight to number 100? Yeah, like that would be me trying to push people up the ladder. And right now, I can do more of that exercise of like going like, hang on a minute. Let me step into this guy's shoes and see the world from their point of view and like what I'm trying to, how I'm trying to change the world and why that's hard. And maybe the fact that it's hard teaches me something, and maybe we're going to learn something together.
Yeah, and when I hear you, of course, I can hear that you want to drag people, you want to convince people, you want to really make the most of people around you. But again, talking about challenges, when you face someone, your boss or somebody in your organization, someone who is not considering localization or language management, language experience as something so valuable or so value-driven, how do you sort of position your team, manage your team, and even elevate your team to make sure that your team is not just doing a good job, but that your team is, more integrated in the business and, of course, celebrated in the business? What sort of advice would you give to someone facing that? I'm sure you faced that in your career.
Countless times.
Just like me, so perfect.
Yeah.
And just curious, because everyone, I have my own experience telling me that I should do this and not do that. But what about you? What would you do?
I think there's two things, right? One is definitely to invest in trust, like building that trust. Someone, we're all reticent, when there's change, and new people are equals change, right? Yeah. And so investing in that trust, building that relationship, ensuring someone sees that I'm a good guy, right? Like I'm well-intended. I want to help. Like I don't want to just go in as a bulldozer of change for the sake of it. But my biggest tip is study or pray. Right?
Yeah.
Like for me, like if there is someone, like I zero in on this stakeholder that I'm trying to influence, whether that's a new manager or someone else, like I study like what keeps this guy up at night. That's right. Like and trying to think, okay, like he has this agenda. He wants to achieve things 1, 2, 3 by the end of year. Fantastic. Can my team impact any of these things? Maybe not the first 2, but maybe the third. Right? Like so I'm gonna find something that I can impact, and I'm gonna show that I can, right? So, but that means curating the message, right? Every time I talk to the guy, I need to use his jargon. I need to make sure that I talk about things that matter to him so that we align. Like we need to get on the same wavelength. And that as a new person means you move wavelength. When the guy's ready, you move him to yours, right? And that's probably somewhere in the middle. But initially, it's an exercise of empathy and alignment that is on the localization professionals and to do and carry out.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And there is another type of human challenge, if I can use that term, which is the relationships between a client, a buyer, as we say in the localization industry, and a supplier. And again, based on my own experience, there is sometimes some misunderstanding between what the supplier can offer and what the client needs.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience in terms of managing not just your team, but managing the relationships with your suppliers, with, LSPs and others? Because I think that it's sometimes it can be a real issue when suppliers are just too centric, or they are just focusing on what they want to do and not what you as a client need. So what is your experience to make sure that you can not just work with the suppliers that you need, the LSPs that you need, but you can select them and say, okay, I can work with this supplier but not with this one.
Okay, I can tell you how I do it. I don't know if this is how it gets done.
Yeah, sure.
But two things: the people, right? Like I need to click with the people. Like because let's face it, life's tough as it is. Like I'm not gonna work daily with someone that is not pleasant, or aligned. We're not on the same or it drags me down from an energy perspective. The second is I declare my agenda. I'm like, listen, I'm trying to get X done, right? Or I'm looking for a partner that can give me X. Super happy to hear ideas, right? And for you to iterate on what I'm trying to get. But for you to upsell other stuff and sort of basically tell me that, for example, my translations are crap so you can sell me translations, but I'm actually looking for auditing, for example, it's just not gonna cut it, right? So being crystal clear about my agenda and asking, what is your agenda? Like, why did you come and fish me out from all of the people you could pitch your services to? And then maybe I'm looking for a success story to put on my page. Fantastic. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can't because my PR doesn't. But if that's what I'll get you what you need, right? But we need to be aligned on what I get from this relation. So there needs to be a mutual interest in making things work and a willingness to nurture their relationship, right? So that it's not transactional. So for me, I don't look for vendors. I look for partners. And
that's
so it's
what I was expecting.
Yeah,
that's my lens.
Yeah, partners and partnership is so important because it's not just a matter of value creation, but it's a matter of, sustainability and keep a supplier not just for 1 week or 1 month, but actually to make sure that the supplier can be on your side, just like, a colleague would be. But it's just an external sort of partner. Yeah.
But I actually, over years and years and years, because the previous life I was going to be a partner in a firm of accountants. That's my original training. And in that profession, in this profession, what I have seen over the years is that not all organisations have mature or sophisticated communication channels, and there isn't enough investment sometimes put into effective communication channels, because the irony of it is it cuts down on cost in the overall running of a business. So I agree with you. I think that's wonderful, but not everybody has a sophisticated communicational set up in their organisation.
Yeah.
They're not encouraged, they're not trained, and then, oh my God, it's like watching rabbits jump around the place.
Yeah, and that's why personally I always wanted to work with partners as well, not just vendors of commodities, because translation, localization have been very often sold as commodities and are still sold as commodities. But when you go to the stage of partnership, you go beyond this sort of level of commodities and you start saying, okay, your services are creating value. So it's a sort of profit driver and not just
a cost
center, because that's really a pain in many organizations, is that procurement people are just saying, what is the lowest cost per word that you can offer? And of course, I mean, if you stay at that level, the lowest cost per word, you're not going to go very far with any supplier, I believe. And of course, it's impossible to have a partner just being told, keep it as as low cost as possible. And of course, we all know that low cost is not always the best cost. So that's.
I'm sure procurement adds a lot of value to a lot of procurement services in your organization, but for language, I'm not sure. Like I do my own sourcing
I tend to agree with
and
you.
negotiations.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there is, of course, another type of challenge which is more technology driven or business process driven, which is I'm going to use the buzzword of the century, AI. So what? Yeah, it's of the century, probably of the millennium. So what is for you now, or what would be the future main challenge with AI? Again, in terms of implementation, in terms of adoption, in terms of getting ready for it, because there are so many implications with AI. It's very, it's about data strategy. It's about getting new skills, new tools. So there are a number of implications about using AI that even come before using it. It's it comes after the decision to use it. What are the steps? What are the challenges? Talking about challenges for you in terms of AI enablement.
Internally, definitely leading people through change so that they do not see this as something scary, right?
Yeah.
To democratize access to it and the skills needed to make the most of it within the organization. To go beyond it in certain fields is not going to cut it. And then, of course, there is a duty of transparency to the users, right? There's data protection challenges that come with it. So depending on the applications of AI to language, the language field, there will be challenges that had to be navigated or taken into account when making decisions. I don't know what the future holds, but I think there is going to be more and more a two-avenue, right, for our sector. AI is going to do the, more and more and better, the trivial stuff. And so the individuals, right, the people need to invest in how they could add value beyond that commoditized element, because the average translation jobs are probably going to disappear. And so it's more about how do we invest in what we could do beyond that. And so this other avenue I see as the one that if I was just, let's say, graduating as a translation graduate or as a language professional, this is where I would invest in. Like, I wouldn't necessarily invest in just prompting skills, etc. It's good. Like, you can do a course on Udemy. Like, it doesn't need to be complex or very expensive. But investing in the other bit, yes, you need to do. It's a bit of it's going to be a bit of a jigsaw, right? The skill set required for jobs in the future, at least in our field. It needs to have the technical know-how. For sure, people are going to, put your resume up in the top candidates list if you've got those skills, like you can do prompting, you've got access to the interfaces, you know where to embed them, you know how data protection comes into play, and so on and so forth. But also, how do you add value on top of it, right? Like, how do you understand the user experience element? Do you understand the psychology of the user as it comes to text? And how do you take that into building on top of what AI does and taking it to a different level? I don't think it's going to be like, for example, there's a lot of project management in our industry. I don't think the project management is just going to move to an AI field. I don't think that's the only place where we can take our careers. I think it's complementary to that. So I think this is what the future probably holds, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. And who knows? No one has a crystal ball.
No, it's impossible to make any prediction, to be honest. It's a question that comes up very often. What is your prediction about AI? Well, indeed, you need a crystal ball, and even with a crystal ball, I'm not sure you would get a prediction. And talking about challenges, but this is very personal now. Your professional development. I mean, when I look at your career, it's really rich. You move to different companies, and I mean, I could see, just without knowing you, I could see that based on this, CV. Wow. This person has been really developing herself professionally quite aggressively in the good sense. So what would be, again, the sort of advice, maybe, or recommendation you would give to somebody who is struggling a little bit with his or her personal development, professional development in any organization? It can be a startup, scale-up, a multinational company. What would be, based on your own experience, because you demonstrated a lot of professional development, what, in addition to passion, of course, but what would be the main thing that you would say, you have to do this?
Okay, something really tactical. I would buy a book by Shanna Kennedy. It's called The Life Plan. And it has a very cool exercise almost at the beginning. It basically has let's take a blank sheet of paper and let's think about what am I good at? What do I like? And who am I without, I think, the roles we play, right? Like Giulia the sister, Giulia the mother, Giulia the who am I once I put these clothes back in the wardrobe? And what do I like? What am I good at? And what does the market need? So if I can do the soul searching and then find the moment where these three things meet, right? What I'm good at, I like, and the market needs. And that is going to be very personal and subjective to everyone. And their market may not be my market. And that's the sweet spot where you need to invest in learning.
Okay, that's
very interesting.
Very good.
Rather than copy-pasting than the learning done by someone else. It may not fit you. Because in the end, the moment you're not investing in your authentic passions and needs and drivers and things you're good at, it's where it gets challenging, right?
How are you encouraging your sons? I know they're only children, but still, it starts young.
Oh gosh, with a lot of mindfulness. Like I always say, I wish, what if, I was brought up in the 80s, so mindfulness was definitely not a thing. At a very traditional upbringing, you were told, this was right, this was wrong. And with my kids, I'm trying to get them to question things and to invest in things that they believe in. My son, when we moved from the UK to Italy, one of my sons struggled a little bit with the fact that school in Italy is very academic and there's homework, for example, that they didn't have in their London primary school. And he says, homework is wrong. I don't think it's fair, right? I spent so many hours there. I should come home and play. And he says it doesn't add to my learning. And I keep saying to him, do you know what? Unfortunately, you have to do it. I know, right? And that's life. Right?
It is life, yeah.
But hold that conviction. If you study hard, you will be able to be the guy that changes all that. Keep that energy, that passion, right? If you really believe.
What have you spoken to his teacher?
Because I don't want to be one of those target moms.
I know.
I hear them at the. Oh my gosh!
I'm not the one dealing with the teacher.
I hear them at the teachers' sort of parent days. I just don't want to be that.
I'm wondering if that's a twin thing. I'm just thinking about, I have twin niece and nephew. They're now 23, and it's a boy and a girl. And when he was younger, he was very much that personality. I'm making light here. I'm sure it's not just a twin thing. I'm sure it's a personality trait or something that's encouraged in children in the home. But my goodness, he actually used to sit with the teachers and want to have a conversation about the curriculum because it didn't suit him.
But
it didn't suit him.
It needs to be encouraged. And sometimes I understand the environment may not be encouraging it, right? Because, hey, the teacher's got lots of stuff to do, right? And lots of kids and, or maybe it's just not the right teacher for that.
But most teachers don't have time for 30 children to have an opinion.
They don't have time. But I think as parents, what we can do, I see, for example, my twin boys are very different from each other, right? To me, I hope I can help them to channel their energy and the things that come easy to them and that they're passionate about into whatever it is that they want to do with their life, right? I want them to feel free to build on their existing skill set, right? And the things that they're passionate about and not worry about what doesn't come easy.
Yeah.
Because we're all different. We have different skills and at least when I went to school, like you had to be good at everything. Like you had to do a lot of and you were expected to do like a secondary school that gave you like prep in all of these areas and
for university.
yeah. And maybe they will not go to university. For me, like I hope if there's one thing I can give to them is like the freedom to just build on your fortes and your passion, and that's a superpower because it can supercharge your path to whatever makes you happy in life. And then they just need to be happy, not famous or because that's hard. No, like mine don't have mobile phones yet. Like, but I'm sure like with a lot of pressure from peers and so on, like it's just be happy, not rich.
It seems to be such a difficult balance to get, doesn't it? You know, when I look at parents that trying to, unfortunately, people that conform struggle less in life. That's the pity of life, I think, sometimes, and the pity of the infrastructure we've all set up around us. But we still want our young people to be creators and creative and free in their head, because they are also the people that create great wealth, and not only financial wealth, but, you know, cultural wealth and all sorts of other things. It seems to be a very, very difficult balancing act. Sorry, we've gone off topic here, talking about...
It's very true, and I like the way you put it, you know, when you said that, okay, in the 80s, I can tell you in the 70s was the same, because I'm from the 70s, but it's also very cultural, the way you are raising kids, and not just raising them, but the way they are learning. Very, very interesting to see the cultural differences. You said, okay, Italy versus UK. Of course, it has to be different because obviously, you know, the culture is also very different. But even when you grow up as an adult, you still keep your cultural lens, if I can put it like that. I was going to say bias, but it's not very positive. So yeah, but okay, let's say cultural glasses, your cultural lens. And I think that, you know, from your perspective, what is the sort of the lessons that you learned personally about, you know, facing other cultures or working with other cultures or just talking to people with other cultures? In other words, you know, I'm sure that you never went or you bumped into some sort of cultural clash, but nevertheless, I'm sure... Okay. Yeah. I'm sure that, you know, culturally speaking, you had to sort of, in the beginning, deal with it.
Former colleague gave me a book called The Culture Map.
Oh, yeah.
And I love it. Like, it's one of those books that I think it's worth keeping, like, as in a physical copy of it. And because at Qualtrics, it was my first experience working in an American company. Oh. And... it was different, right? Like from a lot of places I'd been. And I felt I needed a machine translator that didn't exist. Like I needed to translate some concepts and energies into my own, right? So that I could digest them. And the culture map gave me some of it. I don't know if there's a lesson that I've learned, but definitely... definitely be curious, right? Like have a curious mind for these diversities and find them enriching. There's things there's, for example, cultures that maybe are very different from yours and you're finding hard to navigate or talk to initially, but that they show enormous grit, right? Or something else, or passion, or something that conviction, something that teaches you, like for example, for me, for the Americans, like I learned a lot about conviction. Like they could sell an idea like so easily. Like for me as a European, you know, you present an idea and you're almost apologizing for it. I don't know if it's good. Americans, they learn to say that their idea is going to change the world at the age of 6. You can't compete, right? Like you get there at 36 and you're like, but with curiosity, right? Have a curious mind for these differences. Be mindful of them. Observing, just being aware, I think, is just giving yourself that that second of pause between when you hear something that rubs off the wrong way and when you act or say something. Right? There's always that minute when you can make a choice.
Yeah.
Right? As to how you act, like how you react. And we just need to invest in that minute, I think.
I think that you were very generous in that you described all the positive cultural differences. I've been on the receiving end, as have we all. of some of the more negative cultural differences, particularly around gender. So, I mean, and I've ended up having to sometimes walk away because once it's said, it's not unsaid. But that can be quite hard to deal with. And it's just, I've been owned my own business for a long time, and I had somebody who worked for me who it ended up very uncomfortable. It didn't end up too well for him, unfortunately, because I had to make a decision. I had to make the hard call and the hard conversations, and I'm well able to do that. I don't always like doing it, though.
Do you know what? Like, I come across it. Of course, I come across it. Like, there are men that don't like to be told what to do by like cultures. A senior woman of certain cultures. Yeah. But then I think these days, like, I can really take a step back and think, like, gosh, he was brought up in a culture where a woman doesn't tell you what to do as a man, right? Like, and so I'm like, I respect that as a place where one is coming from, and I'm just gonna put that sort of filter in between what happened and my reaction to it. And generally, like, I'm quite open about, like, listen, this is how I felt, right? Like, I don't think that cuts it for me. Like, how can we work together to take it to a different place? But I've been very lucky. I think tech in general has less gender bias than a lot of other places. So it comes with its challenges, but I've felt blessed. Like, I had, like, also strong women leadership that I could look up to. Not everywhere and not necessarily in the field of localization, but I would study these women leaders or diverse leaders, and I would try and make a list of, like, what I liked about them and what traits I could bring into my very own
living
working persona, right? There's a book for kids that it's about designing your own superpowers. I can't remember the name right now, but your own superhero, and it has taught me a lot. Because it is true that we have a bit of a blank canvas when we define how we show up at work, right? And the values we bring into this persona and the characteristics, the features, the way it shows up are entirely fictional. And they don't need to resemble the way we are in our personal life, right? There is that freedom. It's like an entirely different field of play. And that has given me the freedom to go a little bit out of, like, what my personal boundaries maybe would have been. And that helps also in dealing with some culture. Like, maybe if I face them in, like, when I go about my personal grocery shopping, I would be a bit more bothered by it. But at work, like, I know how to set them straight.
Yeah, and when you talked about cultural diversity, one question popped up in my mind. I spent myself several years in the US, several years in Asia, so living and working in very different regions. What would you say, or what would you do if tomorrow your company today, Revolut, or another company would tell you, Giulia, we have a great opportunity for you. You are going to become our VP language experience, but you have to go to the US or you have to go to China. What would you say and or do?
Assuming there was no logistical restrictions, like from a family.
They just relocate your whole family, so they take care of everything. A real expat.
I think I would consider it.
Okay.
I would. That depends on the country. It needs to be. For me, maybe for all of the leaders in our industry, it's not just about the opportunity, it's also about the country. As in, because we're cultural geeks, right? Like, so is it a culture that you want to explore, that you've always been intrigued by, or is it not? Like, because if it doesn't get me excited and then it's just about the opportunity, I know I'm going to tire of that opportunity. So there needs to be a combo. But... you know, so one thing, we talked about Revolut earlier. Do you know one thing that is really great about Revolut that I didn't come to my mind before? I love how diverse my colleagues are. Okay. Revolut just hires the best talent, no matter where they are, Yes, they have some location hiring strategy that guys. So, for example, if there's a role for specific departments have like specific maybe locations as suggested hiring locations. But if you find the right talent, I'm not saying you can hire them anywhere, but you can offer them visa and you can the right talent. Revolut goes above and beyond for the right talent, and that brings in a very diverse employee base, and it's enriching, and it's what? It's also empowering as someone whose first language is not English.
Absolutely.
Because you see in a lot of these big companies, and you see that there's like bit of a ceiling, right, for people whose first language is not English, that they reach, and then they don't go beyond. So if you look at the C-suite, they're all like either American or Irish or British or whatever, Australian, and it gets a bit boring.
They
and
look
you're
and
like,
sound a certain way.
right? It's just like when you don't see a woman at that leadership level, you're like, if I don't see a non-native English speaker or a non-headquarters born person at those levels, it doesn't make me feel represented by that senior leadership. And it does make me question,
where's my opportunity?
right, where's my opportunity? So what I love about Revolut is this. There's pussyfooting around the issue that talent wins. Talent is king, right? And it doesn't matter where you're from or the way you speak, or if you make mistakes when you utter sentences. No one cares. Unless you're a copywriter, that is.
That's great. That's really great, because in terms of corporate culture, just talent first. And we are in 2024, so basically people can work from anywhere in the world. So when I hear some companies that are focused on location before talent, just because this location is low cost or, whatever, there are some considerations for the location that comes even before looking at the skills or the experience of the person. I find this so...
Restricting. It's surprisingly...
Ridiculous, I was going to say that. Yeah,
okay, sorry. I jumped in there. Sorry about that.
No.
It's surprisingly common. So when we get asked to help people, organisations find staff, a number of them actually need the individuals to be based. They call the job remote. The job is described as remote. But they have to be based in the country where these people have a physical presence for sort of tax and legal purposes. But there are so many ways of working so that you're not restricted like that. But I'm not trying to criticize anybody and their business models, but I do wonder if they're restricting themselves to access to people.
Yes, they are. But I don't think that's going to be for long.
Change.
I think that's going to change. Sorry, there's one thing that you guys said that really made me laugh because it made me think of a challenge we had. Isn't it amazing how the language we speak, drives the way we think? And look, we were talking about the same thing. You said ridiculous, and she said disheartening.
Did you say disheartening?
What was the word you said?
Restricting.
Restricting.
Yeah.
It was
Restricting.
And then you said it was ridiculous, and that made me think.
Our first conversation.
That made me think that. Like one of the sort of experience management metrics, qualitative metrics par excellence is CSAT, right? The customer satisfaction score.
Yeah.
People whose first language is French have ridiculously low CSAT scores, and you have to normalize them. When you look at those data as an aggregate, you have to normalize the French ones before you aggregate them.
Really?
Because otherwise, yes.
My recruiters probably know this, but I didn't.
And that is across geographies.
Okay.
So he's not from France, right? So
no, I know that. Yeah.
But to me, this is crazy. So that a Bruno in Belgium, a Bruno in France, a Bruno in Quebec, they would have very low CSATs compared to Portuguese speakers globally or Italian speakers or like.
So what is the benchmark? What is it being measured
It's just that culture is not just location. It's driven by language as much. The way we think.
Yes. Absolutely.
Is absolutely influenced by the language that we speak. I don't know. That's an area that I haven't studied in detail.
I totally agree with that.
It's crazy.
I knew I was going to be on the spot today somehow. So it was like, now, okay, I was right. So no, but it's very true. I mean, the way people, me and everybody, express their feelings or their emotions is, of course, language driven. Otherwise, it would be really strange that, everybody would say exactly the same thing in the same way. We are all different.
I suppose, though, in a way, it's a pity that we identify languages as our second, our third, and our fourth language, as opposed to what we were speaking about earlier as our living languages. Because surely if they are actually our second, third, and fourth language, some of it is how it's being taught to us. So you use the word, you're ridiculous, but if you were taught by somebody else, you might use a different word. So that's, in a way, it's a bit of a pity that we actually identify them as first, second, third, and fourth languages.
I think there's a mother tongue. Like, it's apparently something that I think you need to be living in before the age of 6 or 7. I can't remember what the threshold is, in order for you to be, for that to be possibly your mother tongue. Like anything. But I don't believe in second, third, and fourth. I believe in a binary. That's a mother tongue, and there's the rest. And then how proficient you are, that depends on how many years ago you were there, or how much long for you were exposed to that culture. But
and actually I think it's easier to notice this sort of language driven expression or differences when my own experience was that when I was in the US, I noticed, although of course it was US English, but of course they were speaking in a very different way than British people. And British people said, "Whoa, these Americans are rude," because they are so direct, they are so blunt. They used even the word blunt. So I realized, okay, they both speak English, but on the British side it was more to be softer, to be more diplomatic. And of course in the US it was more like
get to the point
and punch it, And so I realized it, and I saw that for English-speaking people. But I could not say that. I could not see that very easily for French-speaking people because it's my language. So I appreciate your comment.
We're blind to that.
Yeah, exactly. We're blind when it comes to us, and it's easier to say, "Oh, yeah, this one is Australian, this one is American. They don't speak the same way, or they don't behave.
They don't
the same.
feel.
They don't feel the same way. Yeah, exactly. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's human nature, isn't it?
Human nature.
We all use ourselves as the benchmarks.
We are still human, so we are still, for the moment, human. So
I'm very conscious of the time. You've been very good to come and do this, and very much enjoyed talking with you. Very nice to meet you, I have to say.
Yeah. Nice meeting you. Thank you so much for having me.